chapter. And I'd like to thank especially our guests tonight for joining us in this discussion. We have been kind of in and out of the discussion of the imagery that our school uses, and we so appreciate the voices around the table tonight and some of the perspective and the background to the decisions that we are about to make. So I would like to note that only one other board member is here, Brian Hafer. We have another member to this committee who wasn't able to make it tonight, Jack Heyman. I need first an approval of the agenda.
For the agenda.
So moved, and we do not have any public comments. Okay. So let's begin maybe with some.
We had some public comments.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Perfect. Yes, we did have a couple of public comments, and I know that the board got them and read them, and we do acknowledge that they have. So I'd like to begin with introductions around the table, so we often know who's here to chat about this. Starting with myself, I'm Joan Ensign, and currently I sit as the board president for this group.
I'm superintendent for Waunakee Schools.
Terry Angie, invited guest.
Brian Hafer, board member.
I'm Tim Decora, teacher at the high school. Josh Dash, teacher at the high school.
Tim Shell, Director of Secondary Curriculum and Instruction.
Oh, okay. Samson.
Probably Sam.
Yeah, that's.
I attached it to the calendar invite.
All right, great. Samson, is that you on the Zoom call?
Yes, this is me, I guess.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. So we're just going through and doing introductions. My name is Randy Bittenberg. I'm the superintendent for Waunakee Schools. Could I just have you introduce yourself as far as like what your role is with the Ho-Chunk as well?
Right. My name is Samson Falcon. I represent the Ho-Chunk Nation, the Heritage Preservation Department, the executive director, and I'm happy to be included on issues like this regarding, just the three goals that you all have in front of you, and being a part of that as far as the nation goes. Not only for the nation, but I know that we do have Ho-Chunk people that reside in that area and that are able to they themselves weigh in, but also for us. And I know that Bill was going to be there. That they have some representation, as far as coming from the nation. So thank you for the invitation, and glad to be here.
Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you for joining us. So to begin tonight, Randy's going to give us a little background and kind of the direction of where we and how we got to this spot that we are sitting on.
What I wanted to start off with is just kind of give a little bit of history. I mean, this is starting my 14th year as superintendent in Waunakee, and the conversations around imagery, around the mural in the gym, which we'll talk about in a short while, those all predate me by every few years. And those conversations have come up every few years as far as their discussion, as far as appropriateness, should they be there, is it time to move on, or kind of a historical aspect of it. I appreciate Terry being here. Terry being one of the artists who brought that forward in the late 70s to our school. And I thought one of the things as we go through tonight is to just find right out from Terry kind of what the history is of that, because it's become a bit of a urban legend around, it's my turn, around the history of where that all arose from. So I appreciate Terry being here. But this conversation is something that's definitely been evolving, I would say, over the last 10 to 15 years. as we've changed some of our facilities, we removed some pieces of it. You don't see like the spear or any of those type of logos in our soccer stadium or our football stadium. When you go into the field house at the high school, you're seeing the term warriors, but some of the other pieces with regards to the W in the gym have just gone with the straight black W, just to kind of remove some of the pieces around the imagery that I've done there. This discussion definitely predates any work of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. But certainly that is a place that has brought it to the board over the course of the last 6 months or so. So the DEI committee did take this up, and they forwarded some recommendations to the board, as you can see in the materials that I forwarded off to, as far as just looking at the mural in the gym, and then also the bigger picture of imagery. School board then moved it to this committee. They moved it to the goals committee. We met again in March. At that point, they asked for administration to put together a recommendation as far as what a process could look like to review this. Because I think the piece the board felt was that the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee certainly forwarded this year. They brought it with a respect to have action to it, but I felt that from the board's perspective, when it was received, was wanting to have some additional discussion and process around it. So that's what really brought it back to the board at the April 12th meeting, and at the May 10th meeting, I guess, I'm sorry. And really 3 different directions came out of that. First of all, generally that it was moved to this committee of the board to kind of, so this is a public discussion. And the 3 items for review were in relation to the imagery and the artwork in school, particularly the mural in the old gym. Also imagery and visualizations, particularly as we go through our branding process, which is just kicking off here actually next week with a meeting with the board, and Nathan Chow, who is our consultant, who will be working with us over the next year on that process. And then some things that I know Kim Schell, our director of curriculum, who's been working with some of our staff and the village with regards to some cultural pieces that we can enhance as we move into our curriculum. So that's really what's brought us here today. And I think the 3 things that we're looking at from the committee, some of which may come tonight, and some of them are going to be a little bit longer term in duration. So one, a recommendation on what we should do with the mural and the old gym. That's 1. 2 is input on parameters. This is not a decision-making piece here this evening, but definitely looking for feedback that these committee members can take back to the board. And then there'll be other focus groups around the community to talk about branding. That's some input with regards to that moving forward. And then also recommendations and seeking out opportunities for a continued partnership with the Ho-Chunk Nation with regards to work with our staff and curriculum items, particularly as we look at 31. Some of those things, and making sure that as we are presenting things that we're doing so in the most appropriate, respectful, and accurate manner as we can. So that's kind of the history of kind of why we're here and what's brought us here. Anybody have any questions about that before we? So first thing that we have in our agenda is really to touch base about the mural in the gym. And this says, I'm just going to bring it up here so everybody can see it. This is in our, we have 2 gymnasiums at our high school. We have our large field house where most of our larger events, our varsity teams play. And then this is our smaller gym, our older gym. It's the classroom for Tim. That's where Tim Decora teaches our fire classes. And we also have our gymnastics competitions there. And we have other freshman and JV sometimes play their games in this gym. There's definitely used as one of our instructional spaces. All of our students can interact in the space. So that just gives you a bit of an idea of where it's located. One of the pieces I felt was important for us to have is kind of the history of it, because I think that there's been just a lot of misnomers as far as where it came from and what the history of how it came. So I asked Terry and Angie to join us tonight, so I appreciate you being here, Terry. So as I shared with you when we talked a few weeks ago, going to ask you just to kind of provide the historical pieces for the committee so that we can all hear. And this is a recorded meeting, so if folks in the public can hear directly from you as far as what the history of this was in the late 70s when you were a student at our high school and developed this. So if you
Sure.
mind.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, Randy and I talked last week about it. He got the history of it. And Tim Decor and I have talked over the years because this has been coming around a lot. Sometimes it's just with the warrior name itself. But so before that Indian was made, the old high school, Waunakee High School, had a chief's face on the wall with a headdress. It was just the head of a chief. And it wasn't a character, and it was a nice face of an Indian and headdress. And then in January of '72, we moved into the new high school. And then in '74, I was in art class. I was a junior then, and Mary Lockhart from art class, a teacher, she asked me if I could, they were talking about getting a new Indian up on the walls, a warrior. So she asked me if I could maybe do something like that along with Phil Couric. And so I decided to just go to I could draw, but I wanted to have an actual look at something that I could maybe copy. And I just found the picture of that kind of brave. It was in a book. Wasn't all dressed up like that, but he was looking out like that. And it was maybe about that tall in the book. So I sketched him, and then I added a bunch because I don't even think he had much on him except for the breechcloth. And so I added moccasins, I added those armbands, I added the tomahawk, I added the necklace. I think he had that feather. And then so it was done. I drew it, and it was approved, and then we shrunk it somewhat, and then we were able to put it on an opaque projector, and we took it to the old auditorium, the old stage in the high school, because they had the back wall that was high enough so we could put up 4x8, 3 4x8 plywood. So it was 8x12, this big block of plywood, showing the opaque up there and outlined it. Don't hit that opaque. Don't hit that opaque projector. Don't budge it. So we outlined it, and then we were able to and shade it in, and then we cut it, and then we painted latex and I think some acrylic for the armbands and all that. And then we put it up on the wall with that purple drape behind it, and there was a little plaque that's, I don't know when the plaque came, but it said, I think, just Phil Couric, Terry Angie, created in 1974. The Tribune came out, took a picture of it, and that is basically it. And we got an A on the class, and for quarter or whatever. But so there it stayed, and then but then that was fine for a while. Of course, it's just, we didn't talk to any Ho-Chunk people about approval or anything like that. It was just something that decided we need another Indian and warrior up on the wall. We wanted a full figure one this time, so that's what we did. But I think in the 80s or 90s, they were talking about changing the warrior name. I know Tim was at one of these meetings. It was talked about again with the school board. We're going to get rid of the warrior name. And at that time, I think we were removing images of Indians off like the mats and off the helmets and stuff like that. And but I think the consensus was, and Tim was very proud of the name and said so as far as genealogy of it being that way too. And we liked the warrior name, so we kept it. And I didn't think there should be any discussion until the nation's capital, Washington Redskins, decided to do something. The capital of our nation can't do anything about their derogatory name. And I said, until they do something, there's no discussion. Well, they've done something. So the warrior name wasn't changed, but now it's kind of back here again. And I'm saying, if it's offensive to anyone, maybe it's time has come. I don't mind if it's brought down. What you removed. We're trying to do that, and that's fine. Let's be more sensitive to people nowadays. So if it's offensive to anyone, I think it probably should come down. What I'm considered or interested in, what would happen to it. I don't want it to be destroyed, but maybe there's a place for it somewhere. So I think, Randy, you mentioned maybe there is some places like that or not really. So.
And that's for me, that's the They don't have.
What do we do with it? So it's probably will come down. What do we do with it? That's just a discussion for another day. That's the history. Oh, and then maybe about 3 years ago, I texted Brian Kirsten. I was in the gym, the new gym, and it's like the new high school. It's like the new field house. Like, can I get a tour? And he took me around. And then we went in the old gym. I looked at him and I was proud of him. And I took a picture of him again. But the plaque was missing. And I don't think the plaque's there. Oh. Yeah, so I asked Brian to put up a new plaque. So he did. He put up, me and Phil created it back in 1974, but he added a lot of verbiage. This, Ho Chunk, indigenous to this area and all that. So he added a lot, which I think led to the urban legend that we did a lot of research. And we did no research when we first built this. I just went to a book, copied it, and added things that are not historical at all. And so that's kind of the history of that Indian. And then so I guess that's it, right?
That's kind of what I was looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure, Joe.
Any questions for Terry? That's just kind of where it all.
Not for Terry per se, but when the warrior name was originally thought, I mean, is there any historical script? Was it the Native American in mind, or was it just the warrior? And over time it turned into.
Because of Ho Chunk, because of Ho Chunk.
Yeah, I just didn't
History
know
and all
when,
that, right?
when the school
Warriors
district
were
said
attached
warriors,
to,
what were they thinking?
To the Indian nations, right? So.
It's another goes back to us, is that there was a less type of some one of the old gyms that would have been what's currently heritage. Is that what I'm thinking? Is that what I'm
Yeah.
That would have been, and actually, Peter Simon made that.
Oh.
Because it went back.
Okay.
My son has it.
Is that right? Well, that was a little smaller, but still probably about 5 feet high. Yeah.
When this was designed, was it meant to be Ho Chunk, or was it just general?
A general kind of a
Native.
Plains Indian, right? He was just a Plains Indian, the one I sketched. I added the tomahawk, I added, other moccasins and stuff. I just thought I'm gonna make this Indian look cool. So I just dressed him up. I was an Indian dancer. Randy Bloomberg was an Indian dancer through Order of the Arrow, Boy Scouts. So we enjoyed that part of our lives, and I respected the Indian nation very much.
A few weeks ago, Jim was able to connect in with President Waunakee from came down and walked through the facility. I think the word he used was Pan Indian. It's basically something that didn't represent maybe one nation or one specific culture, but was a conglomeration, just kind of a generic warrior of what it was presented as. That was, I think, the word. I thought, this is a piece that's definitely had a lot of discussion over time. We felt as it came through the board again that it needed to have some formal process to it. So I appreciate Terry bringing the historical piece as far as where it came from. But the charge that we have in front of our committee is kind of what's the next steps with regards to where to go with it. So I think that's a piece that I'm looking for some input as far as what thoughts are on this within our facilities. You've done quite a bit of thought process research. This is your classroom, so I want to give you an opportunity if there's anything you have to add. Some of the things that you've seen and lived, and also I know you've done quite a bit of research with people over the last number of months. If there's anything you have to add, I'll give you that opportunity.
Well, I guess a little history. Yeah, a little history. Probably know me as I'm one of the FIDA teachers at the high school, and I've been here for this coming year will be my 27th. And FIDA teacher, and then I've gotten into the coaching with the girls basketball the last couple of years. Been involved with the football program for out of those 26, probably 20 years in the football program. But when I came here, I originally came here to be the boys basketball coach, and that was the competition gym. And I was the coach for 8 years, and never, I didn't come into the gym when I got shown around by our old athletic director, Gail Quinn, who was on the hiring committee. walked in and showed me the gym, and it never caught my mind at all when I first got here, and it was 95, 96. And was the coach, like I said, until 2003. And I don't recall anybody ever asking me my opinions about that particular mural. It was there. Obviously, it's right next to the American flag. So when the band or whenever the national anthem played, there it is. And I didn't see anybody getting squeamish. I didn't feel uneasy at all. Again, a little history. I'm from Wisconsin Dells, and we're at the Chiefs. So I'm kind of pretty proud of that myself. And to be able to come here and be the Warriors, again, pretty proud of, and proud of wherever I work and who I work for. And it was never an issue. And it seemed like whenever it became an issue, it was some outside entity that somebody got wind of, and they were bringing it to state capital for possible voting on it, getting rid of Native American names and images, and then it would come and go until more recently. And so in addition to being the coach here, I'm also, like I told you, a teacher, and that's my classroom. I've never had any negative feedback, never had any student come up and ask me anything related to the mural. I teach mainly freshmen and have never had any of my students ask me anything about that, ask me, do I know that? Did I know that person? Who is that? It just happens to be in my classroom. Yes, in the last, probably since February, when this kind of started to come about, I spent about an hour or more talking with almost all of our school board members, and about 8 or 9 members of the DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And I was very opposed to having that taken down at that particular time. And I did a lot of research, and I also ended up talking after this. That was all said and done with my conversations with the DEI committee members, a few of them, and the school board members. I made some contact with some of my older folks in the Ho-Chunk Nation, in particular up in the Dells. I said, this is kind of what's going on down here. What do you think? And I think all of them said I think it's about time to move on. And we talked mainly about the mural. So with their input, some elders' input, I had a change of heart because it's not about me. It's about us, the Ho-Chunk Nation, and it's a little bit bigger. And I kind of default. I do default to the Ho-Chunk Nation because I'm a representative of them. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the time and effort that they put in, and they attend more meetings than I do in regards to this stuff. So I had a change of heart from the first time I talked to Terry in March about this, and we talked at length. That he also agreed that maybe it's about time. And at that time I didn't want to, but now I think it's about time that the mural comes down. But like you said, Terry, what do we do with it? Because it is a historical piece. If we fast forward to 2021 and somebody is commissioned to put something up on the wall, it would have a lot of Ho-Chunk background. It would be contacting the Ho-Chunk Nation and asking for their approval, or asking them what they would like to have up on the wall. So being a lot more sensitive to those things now. We weren't back then. So that's kind of my thought process a little bit.
Gosh, Tim and I met with you earlier this summer and asked you if you'd be interested in being on this committee, and you would like to be here, so I appreciate that. As a teacher at our high school, it's not part of the Ho-Chunk Nation, but is of the tribe from the
White Earth Band, Minnesota Chippewa tribe.
Minnesota, so thank you. And one of the things that Cash shared with us was certainly not wanting to weigh into anything that relates to the Ho-Chunk Nation, but just kind of representing as an Indigenous staff member yourself, as far as what that means, as far as having children. So I'll give you the same opportunity, Cash, for some things that you'd like to share. And don't want to put you on the spot, but if there's anything about that, you're welcome to. So.
Well, and Tim and myself have had several conversations about this as well. And like you said, I know I kind of defaulted this to the Ho-Chunk Nation, but I personally feel it's about time for that to come down. And, I share a story that I shared with Tim, my son, who graduated 2 years ago. He'd be in Phi Ed class or basketball practice, and he'd have kids or players say to him, like, is that your cousin or is that your uncle? Or, it really didn't bother him, but say it's another student who it did. It's just, that's not right. So I feel that it's, in talking to Tim and his outreach to the whole chunk, I support that. It's probably time for it to come down.
Roland Sampson, obviously, I'd like to get your thoughts on that. Talking to President White Eagle, he's talked about different school districts that the nation has worked with as they kind of have conversations in a similar vein. I guess looking at your perspectives as representing the nation as far as the immigrant, particularly this item that we're talking about here. Samson, first. Samson, you still there?
Yep, I'm here. I guess looking at that, just for the discussions that's taking place, while I can appreciate the art, the artwork, I could, and then also kind of a recognition, just kind of what Tim was talking about, a sense of the thought that went behind, creating something like that and being able to put that up, kind of showing some respect or some kind of acknowledgement. Well, I can sympathize with that, but and of course I said the but part. I think we're in times where we need to recognize I guess the importance of people and their identities. That's and I'll give you an example. One of our kids from Toma here, they used to be the Toma Indians. They changed theirs to Timberwolves. That they went through that process there, some years back, and even now, there are, I guess, of course. Well, again, my wife went through that. I guess through being in a Toma Indian and the process of, kind of, or she was just kind of getting out of it before they started to change. And when she was there, we're talking some years back now, she said that the volleyball team, when they came out to a kind of drum beat, and how that affected her, like she wanted to be a part of the school, she wanted to be a part of the community there, and then they were doing those types of things, of course not getting any kind of I guess asking about, is this right or should we do this? Just going ahead and doing it because, maybe there, like I'm saying, maybe there's some sort of recognition or some acknowledgement or respect in doing something like that. But, that's kind of the stuff that was happening. And of course, Scalp the Indian, all of that, all of those types of things were a result as far as competition goes, and I'm not sure if that any of that sort of language happens, in that school, in your school district. But I'm just saying, speaking from history on these types of issues, and then also, bringing it back into, 2019, one of our my stepson, he was, they're Timberwolves now, and he was a junior, and they were, it was I guess, what would you call, in their gym class, physical education class, while they were doing that, they're teaching them how to use, or archery. They're teaching them that. And when it was his turn, the instructor turned to him and said, oh yeah, you should be good at this. They're, kind of like a little off comment, and people kind of laughed. And he didn't know what, happened to him. He laughed it off, and then he came back and then he told us, at home. And I was like, hey, that's not, I was like, did you feel some kind of way when, he made that comment, and he said, yeah, I kind of felt, upset about it. And I was like, and so we kind of took some action in helping him to, I guess, help the district, see, what was taking place with, even the instructors, we, but to make it short, I've seen these types of kind of situations, within school districts, and of course, like I was saying, like I can appreciate the art and where it's coming from, but like even in the history, there was no particular, tribe. It's of a Plains tribe Indian, which the Ho-Chunk people are woodland Indians, and so come from the woodland, and so even that, kind of that sort of explanation, is important. Like I was saying, for identity, if there was a Ho-Chunk person there, child, young person, being able to look at that and say, like just like they were saying, is that your cousin or your uncle or like I can't say anything about it because you're like they have no personal connection to that, other than that, you have that pan-Indianism mentality in there where it's like it's put a Native American up there, and then maybe that'll help them to be self-identify with that. How do they do that? They're not connected to it in any way, and so and just like even with the Osseo Fairchild School, high school over there, they used to be was it I'm sorry, Bill, were they the Chiefs or were they?
Yeah, chief.
They're the chieftains. Or
Yeah,
they
chiefs.
were-
I think, yeah, the chiefs, and then they have the little mascot around the Chief Thunder.
Right. And so what that right there is just they went to the community, had meetings, and then they went to one of the descendants of that person. Thunder is my brother, Gordon Thunder, and spoke with him, and he gave them the okay to use that Thunder name, and that's what I'm talking about as far as identity. Those well, I guess Native American children and young people, and Ho-Chunk Nation young people, when they go there, they'll be able to identify with that. It's like, yes, that comes from the Ho-Chunk people, that person that they're acknowledging, and those are the things that's just what I want to put in there. I think that's really important when we talk about this issue of it's not about stepping on people's toes. It's about acknowledging a people, and if you're acknowledging a people, who are you acknowledging? What people are you acknowledging? And putting up that imagery that's going to kind of strengthen whatever identity that they have, or maybe even make them curious if they don't have that, kind of knowledge about themselves. Make them curious about, I'm going to go and look into this, and then and through that, you're educating them, while also, strengthening those individuals that, have that connection with that imagery. And so that's all I wanted to, add that, put that out there.
Thank you, Samson. Bill, did you want to?
Well, Samson pretty eloquent with this, stating, we mentioned before the meeting here in passing, the term warriors itself is synonymous for life and all that, our men of valor and people that are noted for protecting their own. This image on here, let's say this is an Indian, Native American, and so or whatever it was. A catch-all, right? But the term warriors itself, for example, portrays many warriors, several warriors, and there is no reason to represent all like as a warrior society. We have it right here in the U.S. Where it's placed, though, the context of it being placed on a gymnasium inside this area where two schools come together. But I want to love one another there. Opportunity of kids to utilize that signage on there is take great pride in it, or pick on the team. As a school system, part of it, given the ability to other teams come in here, pick on nurturing, right? May not have happened to us specifically, but it happens out there. Why don't we take that away from the process, so they don't have that image that we utilize other ways, of course. As mentioned earlier, just opposite side. Samson reflected upon the whole chunk of people are indigenous to this area, and there's his last leisure periods and present. Transformed through time from people that have lived here since the archaeologists, right? Paleo, archaic, and woodland, and protohistoric, and historic Indians. And those are periods of time transformed who we are. 1,000 years ago, the woodland period, transformed from people, they call this back then. I was called something. They were publishing images from, back in the Civil War, Ho-Chunk standing right next to other folks outside or everybody else, exactly like they were same words. All your words represent. Those are the images that you hear of the warriors. Every Memorial Day, honor all the warriors. They don't have that image up there. Their families, tribal members from the war, perhaps come back, and that's what warrior mentality is. Marlon has the right to come here, serving service. Talk about warrior represents. Family has that same process in place. Take great pride in that term being used up there, but Jim should be surrounded by all kinds of culture. The 70s and 80s, there was a trying times, and they always say hindsight's always 2020. We're at that period of state that hindsight's 2020. Look back now and say, well, how can we improve this process out there? And there's going to be a lot of naysayers out there. There's going to be a lot more people in years to come that can say they did good. I was driving down here today, and I mentioned in passing in a letter to somebody else earlier. This fact that if someone's offended by that, nobody can sit beside someone else and say, "Well, you shouldn't be offended by that," or "Why are you offended to that?" It's what it is. Reality, that person is offended by it. So we want to, do what we can to take them. That's what I think. Ultimately, what happens is you have to make the decisions. Oftentimes, I sit across tables from government, talking about items of cultural sensitivity. The only thing I have the opportunity to do is relay what's in my school. Then they have to take it into account, make their decisions. I go home with my peace of mind. That's all I can do. So everybody here goes home and I have to go to sleep and get up the next morning. Do things right. Sleep. I was thinking about that, and I overheard that. Created that there. Thank you for that, first of all. It takes more thought than you think, right? That's a benefit. Right. It takes more thought than you think to put something together that, even as you're creating that, you have to put it in. So that's, we have tribal partisans even to this day that has this dilemma. How do I represent ourselves as a culture, our heritage? And so we fall back upon, those easier things that applicate traditional type attire that, certain events and gatherings. And yet, we store that away just as you folks store away your suits when you go to church and you go to funerals and so on. It's something different for something, a different occasion. How do you really take that snapshot of time and put it up there? How do you really pick the lawyer? It's easier to change the name, Redskins realize that term isn't, a lot of the names we focus on trying to change, cities and rivers and villages and so on and so forth. Change names easy enough. It's like Toma, Toma Chiefs. There was a Toma Warriors, wasn't it?
Toma?
Yeah,
Toma was the Indians.
Indians. But that term at one time was accepted. They referred to it at one time, Indians. Look in federal regulations out there, and they refer to all Native Americans as Indians. There has to be transition change. Terminology warriors today is catching all of that. All our own men and coach warriors. Maybe that's what you. It's really a good word to encompass what you're doing out there. Right? That's pretty much it. It's interesting to hear he's thinking, that's that. Tribes to get just because there's a state governor created a process there to not have to do it. Anyway, that's it.
So I want to thank everybody who shared and the honesty that I just heard around the very sensitive something long in our history. I went to school. And I've been a warrior and I've seen that Indian and myself I preceded that Indian. And it's deep in my culture. So we've been charged by the school board to collectively come to some type of decision on the role of a small town. As I put around the table and Brian, I don't know if we'll be having enough information to make a motion to the board, or if there's anything that, there's only the two of us, if there's anything else that you feel we need to gather before we
Yeah, I first want to thank everyone for being here too. And, you know, I've known Tim from afar because I knew his daughter as she played basketball. But Tim and I had a great conversation and I want to thank him for that. It was, and really, I was part of the original diversity and equity group. And they were charged sort of as the think tank, as sort of like the look at policies and look at how we do things. This doesn't just happen to Native American students. This is happening to different cultures within our schools. So this was the one, I think, that when they wanted to take initial action, this was the one that it has come back to. And so they're not there to make a decision. They're there just to bring ideas, bring thoughts, bring recommendations to the board. So that's sort of how it got to where we are. Now, if we would have hindsight 2020, we would have brought in Tim and Josh a lot earlier with it. And that was our mistake. So apologize to both of you. But we are here now and it started a discussion and it looks like a pretty good discussion. So, as far as moving forward with us, it'd be great if we had the Jack here to be able to discuss this a little bit further, but I think it's got to move to the board as well. I don't think anybody wants to destroy this.
No, and I think that.
But I think our first move is to take that next step, sort of move into where we are in 2021 and probably remove it, put it away until we can figure out a way to do it. The whole point, and Randy and I have had this conversation too, if it's truly a Native American that we want to honor in our symbolism, into our imagery, we need to be told what is honorable, what is disrespectful, what is a good idea of something we could use to do it respectfully. And I think that's really sort of where we want this to go. But as far as the mural, I think we could take it to the full board for a removal and proper storage for a later time.
I did like a lot of the ideas, involving some kids. It should move back to the student body and what is their warrior now? What, some of the ideas that we heard around the table, I don't want to just take it down and put it away and say we're done with our job. I think we need to do that next step of what does it mean? What kind of, what is it that we want to stand for? And I think, Annie starting that whole branding process and maybe through that we will evolve into some more of a new image.
Yeah, and I think it starts with that discussion and everyone here has some great ideas. But the whole point is to do it, whatever we do it respectfully.
Absolutely.
And we put an end to this constant every 7 years or so. It comes up, as Tim and I have constantly talked about, but we need to do it respectfully. We want to make this as a welcoming community to not just the people who go to school here, but our visitors who come in here for competitions, whether it be in athletics or fine arts or whatever it may be, or just visitors to our school. So that's what we need. That would be our next step with branding and moving forward with that.
Tim and I had a number of conversations, and I think early on, one of the pieces that was a concern to him, it was if this comes down, he feels like there's at least, this is a representation of using your words, Tim, of your culture. And then is there something that takes its place? And one of the things we've talked about, and it goes in line with what you said, Bill, was probably doesn't need to be in the gym, or it has that connotation to it. But I know that there are some efforts. I know Dr. Mishler, who has the arts group in town. I think that they're starting to work, I'm not sure if they're working with you, Bill, or with some other folks about looking at some public art displays that also would be a partnership with the Ho-Chunk Nation. or other ideas we've had as far as, there was a concept of like a land acknowledgement type piece within the school. But I think one of the concepts we have is how do we involve our students? How do we involve partnership with the Ho-Chunk Nation and being able to figure out what is something that we could do that we can use as an educational piece to be part of our community or part of our school.
I'm gonna cut out in a few minutes here. I apologize, I gotta get across that. But that said, each nation, especially the state of Wisconsin, federally recognized tribes, I'm assuming more here. But each nation or tribe, sovereign nation, when they solicited to become a tribal government, people, they also create insignias of sorts, and chunk is no different. 63, we created the Wisconsin Barbados Business Committee, and changed it in 1994 to the Ho-Chunk Nation of Wisconsin. So you see this insignia, and there was a lot of thought given into that insignia there to encompass, in a nutshell, one picture of what the Ho-Chunk stands for. And I say in part because, but if you look at it, see the state of Wisconsin on it there, it'll show the green and the blue, so the earth and the sky. You'll see within there pipes in there showing that we're a people of peace, but also important levels in there, so that we are a warrior-like society, and that's where it works well with what's talking about the Ho-Chunk people, as well as in there to see the great seal of the Ho-Chunk Nation. Each tribe has that, and in place of that, you could contact all tribes in the state of Wisconsin, for example, and they'll supply you the largest flag you want, alongside the U.S. flags and the Wisconsin flags. And that's a great addition to showing the warrior in the state of Wisconsin. That would be the easiest fix for the replacement of that. Show great value of that connection to native communities.
Yeah, I don't know if you and I talked on Zoom about this at all. You were involved with the community, with the sesquicentennial.
Yeah.
So you know that there's a partnership that there's an entity in the village they created with Ho-Chunk. And I know you and I talked to Mr. Gutenberg about maybe kind of piggybacking or doing something along similar lines, because that relationship has been pretty good since end of November. We got you involved and whatnot. But my whole reasoning for wanting to originally keep that was from the teacher in me, and how can we still talk about my people within our community, and maybe if we had done a little bit better job. We do a good job in our social studies departments, maybe biology and art and obviously the history part. But I just don't want my people to go away. I still want them to be, because we're here. And right now people know Ho-Chunk is probably bingo, casino, convenience stores, which is a lot better image than it was back in when I was growing up back in the 70s and 80s. And this is a great opportunity to educate our kids, because our kids are going to be sitting across the aisle from another college student at Platteville, Whitewater, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and they'll at least be able to understand who that person is. If they say, I'm a Chippewa, I'm a Ho-Chunk. Oh, Ho-Chunk. Yeah, we talked extensively about your people in our class. And I think you'd see a Ho-Chunk person, fill up with some pride versus some of the other stuff that's not so prideful.
So,
Do you want a motion to move it?
If you're ready to move it to the board for that discussion, I think then I'll do the motion.
All right, I'll make a motion to move this discussion for removal of the mural, of retaining it to the full board for discussion.
So I will second that. So we will be taking that. Thank you all for valuable discussion.
Thank you.
Sure, but I do want to excuse Bill. And
Yes,
thank you
I apologize for
very
that.
much. No, and I just appreciate your support and what you do to this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bill.
I'm gonna take off too. I have a town board meeting.
Okay,
Thanks, Terry.
thank you, Terry.
The next piece we have is definitely not a one meeting item. It's going to be a piece that's part of our looking at our branding process. Samson, just for your background, our district really doesn't have one sole single logo or brand. It has many. And that is a piece that we've talked about for several years as far as trying to determine what our logo is, going back to even as simple of things as you're sending out flyers to the community, what logo goes in the corner. To everything of what goes on our sports fields, what goes on our uniforms that we have, and then what goes on our business cards. So we're in a process right now. Andy Blackford, who's our communications director, is leading that process. Next week, I'm at our 5:30 meeting of the school board. We're going to be kicking off a conversation with Nathan Chow, who the board has a contract with, to really lead us through a community discussion of what our brand will be. But part of that also includes kind of the logos and imagery pieces. And I know that that's a piece that we often receive feedback on, and it's going to be a part that I'm sure is going to be part of the discussion going forward. So one of the things we wanted to at least bring up today, and let's see where the discussion would be, was particularly, and I just included in board book a picture of really what one of the Waunakee logos. This is one with the black W says Warriors, then it has the spear and the feather. That's been a relatively popular piece throughout our district over time. I think over the last probably 5 years, you've seen some different shaped W's come out, and some that have really been without the spear and the feather, but certainly that still exists within our community and within our district. What we're looking for is any feedback, particularly on this. And I know this was a piece I was talking to Bill about today and at another point in time, and Samson, I would value kind of your input on it, is there's been discussion with regards to kind of the meaning behind either the spear and the feather, or the feather in itself. And those pieces have been brought forward as far as having meaning to different Native nations as far as what those stand for, what they mean. And as Bill was sharing with me kind of offline, it kind of depends on the context from his perspective as far as where it's utilized. But I know one of the things that our board members are going to want to have some insight into is kind of as we go forward with our branding process, and particularly as we're kind of tying in some of our logos do have Native American imagery or related imagery to that, to receive some feedback as far as what do those stand for, what do those mean, and what we need to be taking into consideration as we move forward. This is going to be a year-long process. This isn't like a decision point here tonight. I mean, there will be more community opportunities for people to kind of weigh in with their opinions before those things are finalized. But I thought while we're here gathering tonight, this is an opportunity for us to at least gather some feedback that we can then, as the board gathers this, they can share with Nathan as we start to meet with him next week. I guess not sure, Samson, if you have, I think the one that's been in front of the board was kind of the meaning, the symbolism, and the significance of the feather and the spear. And just if you had any insight from your lens with regards to what that means or what that stands for within your culture.
Yep, I can, just when I got invited to the meeting, I kind of didn't know what what you were all using for imagery, and since this is the main topic here of what is portrayed outward to people as far as these things that you're using, like you're talking about the spear and the feather. This just like you were talking about, context is important, when looking at symbols. And then as far as this spear and the feather, that in this context, putting them together, it's a war like what you call that feather represents a kill. That's what that feather represents on that spear, because either that warrior he took life, or that he went into battle and he counted coup, which is you use some of them used could have used a spear. Some of them had coup, what are called coup sticks, and you go and you get as close as you can to the enemy, and you touch them with that, and that represented that you had some sort of advantage over that person. And so that's kind of what when I look at this type of imagery, that's what I'm thinking about. And this is what our elders, like my grandfather, my other grandfathers from that used to that were here, they used to be here, but they're long gone. When they talk about a warrior society, that's the way the Ho-Chunk people were. They always came into contact with somebody that was coming into the territory that they were residing in, and of course we've seen that through history with we were talking about the Vikings and the Europeans, everybody just coming in. They made contact over there on the Atlantic shore, and then pushed all these other peoples toward us, and so that's where this kind of warlike mentality it began, because they were encroaching. These other tribes were encroaching. Later on, the British and French came through, and it was always kind of like that's the way things were, as a warlike, and then that was just because it had to be that way, to be able to dwell in the same place as somebody that doesn't think like you. They have opposing opinions also about the way people should live their lives. And of course, when you get two people who don't agree on how they should be living, you're going to get a clash. And so that's what I want to share about this warrior. When you say warrior, that's what I think of when you put it in the context of the Ho-Chunk Nation, and what that feather represents, and also the spear, of course, using it, of course, to defend, using it to attack, and then also another big part is they used to use it for spear fishing, and these are the types of things that that come along with this type of imagery, as somebody that has knowledge about why somebody would put these two items together and then put it out there, as far as these are the ideals that we represent through this spear and this feather, and this is what you should know about us, and so that's just kind of a short, when I first had looked at this, and these are the things that I thought, I'm not sure why they would want to, why whoever picked the imagery to put up there, this is why, I'd like to hear why, this is why I put the spear and feather there, and when somebody looks at that, on a jersey or a helmet, this is what I want them to think about. These are the principles that we live by, as far as why we're showing you this imagery. You're gonna get they have that spear and that feather on there. I know that they, and this is why. And so, I have to recognize that, or I have to respect whatever it is that their, ideals are, or their, and why they would be using that, you know, or, you know, holy, look out, they're using that, you know. So I should be on guard, or I should be, and these are just initial thoughts when I, you know, when I first looked at the, you know, what you have up here on the screen. And so those are kind of my first thoughts about it is, you know, but it's just like you said, it's contextual. If you put something out there, this is what you want people to think about you, you know, that this is why I'm using this imagery, you know, and people are going to think that. Otherwise, they're going to make their own, you know, based on their knowledge about that Beauchamp and that Mashu, based on those two things, they're going to form some sort of opinion about you and about what you represent, because, you know, they have, you know, the knowledge that they've and experiences that they've gained, you know, in relation to those two items. And so I just wanted to put that out there, you know, and that would be my question is why the spear and the feather, you know, because this is, and just like I'm telling you, I'm one person, I'm only one person looking at that and telling you this is kind of my opinion of it. You know, there's not a shared, somebody from the nation might look at it and tell you something different, but this is where I'm telling you, this is where I come from, and those are what those images, that's what they tell me, you know. You know, they have whole chunk words, and they have, just like you're saying, different ways in which people use them. You know, the whole chunk people use them, is what I'm saying. And so I'm coming in as one person and just telling you that, you know, and but I mean, these are, I'm just wanted to put that out there, you know, and you know, it's like a kind of a rhetorical question, but also a question, you know, why those things, you know, other than what I've said, why would you all have that imagery?
Thank you. Thank you.
Samson, do you have a sense as far as, and I'm kind of picking on the spot here, so I apologize if you don't know this, please feel free to defer. But when you start to look at, and you gave your perspective on kind of what that means to you, but do you have a sense of where kind of other nations see that as well? I mean, do they see the feather, the spear similarly, differently, or is that, I guess I'm just trying to get some sense, because that's definitely been a conversation that's come up at different points over the years.
When you look at other Indian native tribes, I know that one of my great grandfathers, he was Sioux Indian, Santee Sioux. He was an interpreter between you know, tribes, and the Sioux people had, some would use that spear as a type of a show of what would you call a sign of strength and a willingness not to give in to any situation that's going to be taking place. And so they would use that spear in battle, and they would actually tie themselves to that spear, and they'd put that spear in the ground, and then they would take on whoever it is, you know, that would be, you know, coming toward them. You know, whatever was coming toward them, they weren't going to be running. They stood right by that spear, and just like I was saying, that's what that. As far as, you know, I won't go any further than that, you know, and then of course other tribes, you see them use the feather in a receiving type of way, you know, where they use them to, I guess in a, how do I want to say this, in like generic terms, they receive the blessing that the Creator had given them, and then from that they use that to disperse that, you know, toward the people or whatever's happening. And so that's kind of what the feather, this type of that type of imagery, other tribes, you know, I observe that they use that in the same sense also. And so I won't go any further than that, but there are, like you're asking, other tribes will view these items differently because they use them differently than the Ho-Chunk people.
So open it up to other questions from everybody or any other perspectives that everybody has with regards. I think that's a piece that the board is going to, and really community is going to need to kind of weigh into, is what's our official logo moving forward. And certainly we have some of these pieces that there's been some questions about. So I'd welcome other questions from members of our board or perspectives from folks at our table or questions from people at our table that we can kind of make sure that the committee can forward to the board as we have this discussion.
I think you're exactly right. Sam brought up a couple great points too. I mean, it's the Ho-Chunk may see it one way and another tribe may see it another way. We want to be welcoming to across the state and out of the state and whoever visits us and stuff like that. So we got to be more aware of just what's local, what's it, I believe. So I think this will take some time, but I think as we go through it, we need to be able to talk and show imagery and be able to do some research. I mean, several people have changed their logos from one imagery to more offensive imagery because they didn't do the research. Chances are a lot of these logos are not done by Native American artists or anything like that. It's done by other people who didn't know what they were putting into it. So we cannot make that mistake again. We have to be able to talk to people.
I think the history and essentially you asked about, I think it's based on at some point in the past, somebody liked the aesthetic of what that looked like. And I'm not sure it was based on anything other than that.
Right. But I agree with Sam. I mean, we put together, our imagery has to tell who we are.
Right.
And our community and everyone who wears that logo should be able to explain what it is, not just wear it. So.
Jim, do you have any perspective on that? Because it's mostly, I mean, I've seen it more in the fall.
So I actually, again, because I did my homework and I'm not saying that nobody else did. But Samson, you brought up a couple of things that I thought of, the stuff that we have done in football, in particular, our head football coach, Pat Rice, I believe when he took over, put the spear on the helmet. There used to be a W on there. And I don't remember exactly what it is. And about a couple of months ago, I just asked Pat, I called Coach Rice on the phone. I said, Coach, why did you pick the spear on the helmet? And his words, I can't exactly remember what they were, but he thought it was cool. Florida State, which are the Seminoles, a Native American tribe to that area, who endorses the things that Florida State does with their tribe. They endorse the use of that spear on the football helmets at Florida State. And Florida State at that particular time in the early to mid 90s when Coach Rice took over was a pretty big team in college football. So that's kind of where that came from. Now, Coach Rice also has a football camp for 4th through 8th graders, and it's called the Pride Camp. And he talks about pride. And so when Samson was talking, that's really kind of the things I was starting to think about was do we teach anything about that particular spirit? I think we could do more, but Coach Rice does a little bit with his football program, and there's a tremendous amount of pride, not only with our players, coaches, but it's a community pride, and proud of who we are, proud of what we represent, and I think that spear on our football helmets exemplifies what pride is. I mean, you ask any football player who's been in the program what warrior pride is, and they'll have probably similar explanations to what that is. Could we talk a little bit more about the spear and what else? I mean, I wrote some things down that Samson kind of said: honor, courage, bravery, stand up and fight for, what's right and, stand up for what's best for our community and who we are as a people with our school district, represent and show pride. There's a tremendous amount of pride by our students, staff, administration, community members. I mean, I've heard Joan talk a little bit about being a warrior because she went to school here, and I could feel her pride exuding. So, I mean, I think we kind of exemplify a little bit. We could obviously do a little more. But as I have said in separate individual conversations, wouldn't we want our students to leave the school district, to leave Waunakee High School, not only with great academics and athletics and arts and all that stuff, but we all want to have them leave with some honor, courage, bravery, and be able to stand up for themselves when they go out into the world. So those are some things that when Samson was talking, and then when I was looking at that spear, what it's meant to me as a staff member and a coach, that's kind of what I thought as Samson was talking and as I was looking at that spear. And that's me being involved in our programs and working with our students and working with our administration, who have always asked, what do you think? And that's just my thoughts.
What's your feeling about that?
I think it's kind of stereotypical. Just coming into the district 5 years ago and seeing that, I just think, okay, so they're the warriors, they're natives. What would a native have? You'd have a spear, and I didn't really think there was a whole lot of thought behind it. That's what I'm hearing. Along just with the way things are, I mean, if there was a reason for it, I would be on board with that, but just that it's cool. That's coming.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of things. I mean, I coached, I've been in athletics for over 25 years. So, I mean, every place I coached, we always wanted to, every school we're at, honor, pride, that just comes with a sports program. This, I don't think was the number one issue with a lot of people. But as we're going through this process, we can't just look at one little thing. We have to look at all to see how, and we need to hear, is it honorable? How is it seen across tribes, across Native American cultures? And, it sounds like it's not going to be consistent, but we need to do our due diligence to be able to communicate that.
The purpose of putting this here today was not to, this is going to be a process. Definitely wanted to take the opportunity, because this is a piece that gets some feedback along with the other topics we're talking about. We're going to need to kind of include some of that, and there will be voice community-wise, including staff members, to be able to kind of. I just don't have Tim and Josh representing all of our staff here as well.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be those pieces, but definitely wanted to hear really the context of it and some feedback with relation to the topics we're talking about tonight, and particularly with the opportunity to have some folks at our table tonight that can provide a different context than maybe we normally have. And agree with you, Brian, some additional research and some of these things and anything that. Any other questions with regards to that, John? If you feel, Brian, you got at least a little feedback on that, or is there anything else you're seeking?
I'm still unclear about, I think it will come to the branding process if we do look to change or remove or to modify some things. I'm going to look back to, Bill and Sam and Tim and Josh, and does it show respect? Is it really honoring what we're trying to do, or is it not? And I think that's the whole point. And like I said before, this problem happens across, African Americans and Hispanics and Asians in our schools. This is just the first thing that we, we just need to make sure we're doing things right. We're communicating right. No kid deserves to feel unwelcome at a school, whether they go there or they're a visitor. So it's a process, but I still would want to know what is it truly going to be respectful that is across all of our visitors and community. So it may not be able to happen. I don't know. Then that falls on us to be able to make that decision in our community. So
That's what we need to do.
Yep, absolutely.
To do our best job.
Tim, can I do a minute? One of the things that we're looking at next, and Samson, I know you probably are aware of some of this, but I just want to kind of connect in as one of the things we would like to continue to do is foster a relationship and a partnership with the tribe. And I know that, Tim, you have started working with some of the things with regards to the sesquicentennial. Tim, you were part of some of those as well. But kind of where is some of that work, just to kind of bring everybody in the room up to speed and kind of some of the work we've done, or at least the conversations we have that may kind of impact kind of curriculum, and then is to kind of dovetail into what are some of the opportunities for us to continue to partner on some of that work.
Thanks, Randy. At any point, Tim, where you want to kind of jump in and add something that I am not doing justice to, please do. So the village worked with the Ho-Chunk Nation and the Nelson Center at the University of Wisconsin around a set of activities to elevate the story of the Ho-Chunk Nation in context of Waunakee's sesquicentennial. Because Waunakee, like our district, we are today in what is the ancestral land of the Ho-Chunk Nation. And so there are several projects associated with the work that the village was engaged in with the nation, facilitated by the Nelson Center. One of those related to the schools, others related to the arts in the community, other installations, but we did have one school project. And there was a team, they were students at UW, some have graduated subsequently. They worked with the nation and some previous projects the Nelson Center had undertaken to come up with some resources for us, for our educators on the Ho-Chunk's history, the Ho-Chunk culture, the Ho-Chunk Nation today. And so they prepared a document for us at the conclusion of their work in the spring. As follow-on activities for that, we were able to have the privilege to work with two representatives, two educators from the Ho-Chunk Nation in Michelle Cloud and Bethany Bedford, and they facilitated and I think, Brian, you were able to participate in this recording as well, a 3-hour Zoom-based webinar for educators on culturally responsive education, particularly in the context of Indigenous peoples of Wisconsin and the Ho-Chunk Nation. So we worked with them in that regard. I've had some follow-up conversations with both educators and, one partnership outreach that the Ho-Chunk Nation offers for different groups in Wisconsin is a visit to Black River Falls. Now, currently, they have suspended that because of the pandemic. That's not really open. But what we talked about is when they resume these activities, that they would actually provide transportation for us to send a teacher team up to Black River Falls. And basically, it was presented to me as a very intensive introduction to the studies of the Ho-Chunk Nation, they would actually have, they would send the bus down, there'd be a van, and they would have people there, so you'd be receiving education coming and going, and then there'd be activities in Black River Falls. So in principle, we're committed, once they resume that, hopefully maybe in the spring, we'll recruit and send a team up there. In addition, one of the UW-Madison students who's since degreed and who has a background in environmental education, she is working from the resources that their team developed from the Ho-Chunk Nation, has been doing additional work, and she's developing some additional resources for place-based education trips in our district and near our district. So, for example, Schmitz Woods, she's going to meet within days actually now with Todd Shuka and Lauren Michaels, two of our teachers at the high school. Todd's our environmental ed teacher and is our primary coordinator for Schmitz Woods. Lauren is our instructor for the Exploring Wisconsin elective and social studies. And they're going to develop some ideas for resources that our teachers could use. She's also looking at the high ground over the Ohio River and the Cherokee Marsh, and just some other fairly convenient trips that our classes could make that are in the district or close to the district that could, again, provide cultural and environmental education for our students. And once we get teachers back off of the summer break, we are going to be looking at first our social studies classes, where we try to include coverage of Wisconsin's indigenous nations as we are required to under Act 31, and refresh those units. And also in the sense of, we'll still do breadth of coverage, all of the nations would be represented, but the idea that there'd be a benefit in going deeper in our learning for our students about the Ho-Chunk Nation, because that's the area that Waunakee is in. And we think there'd be a lot of educational value in that. One point that has been made very clear in our conversations with the educators from the Ho-Chunk Nation is, while there is Act 31, and typically in our district we've tried to address Act 31 for our social studies classes. Act 31 doesn't need to be a handful of lessons in social studies classes, and really there are resources that can be integrated into different curricular areas. So we're going to do some initial phase of work, and then potentially circle back for additional feedback with the educators, with an eye to looking at greater opportunities for curricular integration. So we've done some, we've been a little slowed down just because of the things we could and couldn't do with the pandemic, but we're looking forward to doing more in the upcoming year, and then in the spring, a visit up to Black River Falls. Tim, I don't know, am I leaving anything super key out there? Or?
No, I mean, really the only thing that I kind of thought of when you were talking in the Nelson Institute was a former student of ours was involved with that academic area, Carson, I think it's Carson McFarland.
Yeah.
And he did bring up in a Zoom call conversation that I was a part of, that he just didn't recall much education with Native American tribes, in particular the Ho-Chunk Nation, which then also got me thinking about my own kids. They said the same, they referenced the same thing, that there could be more, and maybe more, a little more focused on, here are all the 11 sovereign tribes, 1, 2, 3, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are the Ho-Chunk Nation, because that's who we see splattered all over TV and Badger Athletics. And now kind of here with some of the things that the village is going to do with the information that they're going to put up. They haven't decided where. I talked to Chris Elmer last week, the village president. They're trying to figure out where they're going to put these informational pieces in the community. They just haven't figured that out yet. but definitely a step in the right direction. And I immediately thought of Mr. Shell because of our director of construction. He's been very involved, so. Good to see.
Thank you.
Samson, just a real quick question to follow up. First of all, thank you for those opportunities that have been provided to our community around that education. I think that's great. Bill was at Rotary the other day and did a great job just kind of sharing some history of our general region, which I think was well received. Are there other opportunities that you're aware of that you think that we should be at least thinking about as far as any sort of partnerships or resources the tribe may have that would be helpful as we start to kind of look at things from an instructional curricular end? And certainly Tim in our room here shared kind of the partnerships we have going right now, which seems like there's quite a bit of activity there. But just seeking to see if there's anything else that you're aware of that you want to bring to our attention that we can at least keep on our radar.
Yeah, just a couple things. I know that Bill is a really good resource for that. I know that when I had started in my position here, was speaking to each of the managers for Heritage Preservation. I was letting them know that since we are Heritage Preservation, we are looked at, or should be looked at, as educators. And so that was one thing that I was really adamant about, letting each of them know that this is of course our goal. It's within Heritage Preservation's goals to be able to educate people, and then also the communities that our people, are living in, or so of course, like I was saying, Bill is he's a great resource to be able to call on for just the things that you're asking for, as far as looking at history and culture, and I know because of the pandemic we had to kind of reduce our workforce, and as we kind of come out of it, maybe we'll be able to kind of get some of those people back. And I know that right now they're really busy. Right now he's heading to Iowa, on for reburials purposes, taking care of the NAGPR process for us, for the Ho-Chunk Nation. And so he's kind of all over the footprint of the Ho-Chunk Nation. And so, and doing that type of work, for us. And so, but I mean, like I'm saying, he has in our discussions about kind of the education part, and then in sharing, he is really interested in, being able to help out with curriculum, even create some, and of which his goal is, which I think that's a really good goal to have, is that he takes those things which he creates, his departments, take them to those communities where they're going to be sharing them, and ultimately, finding that person within that community that kind of has ties or connections with that, to be able to present that. They go in, they do the first presentation of it, but it's something that the community can use, continually, and then community, if they need updates, or if they need that, he would be there to be able to do that. Him and his office would be able to do those types of things. And so these are some of the things that he's talking about, and if it wasn't, if it doesn't necessarily have to be a Native American or a Ho-Chunk Nation member in particular, but somebody that understands the content, and understands the way in which he has kind of made this information to be, presented. And so that's kind of what he's, what in our discussion about this type of topic, he's willing to be able to participate in that sort of process. And so, and also, in looking at our language division, just keep them on your radar. I know that they were in contact with some of the school districts there in Madison as far as having language, some sort of language kind of, whether it be class or something that's offered, you know, as far as the Ho-Chunk language within the school district there. And so that could be on your radar as well, because I know that one way that people really identify is with their language. I know that that's the first thing that people ask. If you say that you're, you know, this is where I come from, this is who I am, and just so happens if I am going to begin a conversation with somebody and just getting to know them, I'll say I'm Ho-Chunk, and immediately they'll say, well, you know, can you talk your language? You know, can you speak Ho-Chunk? And you know, I know that's as far as, again, I push that identity issue that gives empowers a person to be able to use their language. And so another one is just our Ho-Chunk Wazijichi language division being a resource for you all to if that's what you would be looking for, is somebody coming in and teaching, you know, or even just presenting, doing a what you would call introduction, I guess, to the Ho-Chunk language. And again, I'm going to say that because of the pandemic, we lost over half our, you know, language division. That's just, you know, what had happened. And so they're in the midst of this pandemic. They've been using a lot of online, you know, creating videos, having Zoom sessions, all of that, you know, and been able to put out a lot of content, you know, for people, not just for the nation members, but also for people who are interested in that, you know, if they heard of Ho-Chunk, you know, oh, well, what, you know, what does their language sound like? They're easily accessible, those multimedia that they've put online. And so that's just another resource that, again, after a while, when everything kind of stables out, that would be a good resource, you know, not only for, you know, our Ho-Chunk people, but, you know, again, for the Native American population and then for the communities, because I think that's, like I was saying, that's what we are about as far as the heritage preservation goes, being those educators, being those people who share, you know, information that we all need to kind of understand each other more. And so I'm just going to put those two out, you know, those two divisions under the heritage preservation umbrella.
Sam, thank you for bringing that up. Language was one of the topics that did arise from the sesquicentennial projects. And at a minimum, one thing we will be doing as part of our place-based education and our curricular revisions will be authentic attention to the place names and you know, environmental features, animals, weather. So at least from a vocabulary perspective, that's the minimum at least we will do. We probably would not be in a position to add a full sequence in the Ho-Chunk language, but the idea of having some introductory workshops and partnering with the language division is definitely something we could explore in the future. So we definitely want to look at that.
Thank you.
The only thing I have is kind of like the next steps. I think we have an action item for the board meeting next Monday. Some of the curriculum work that Tim was talking about, some of the branding pieces that are kicking off, or at least have a discussion and some feedback pieces. And again, that'll be a broader community discussion that will span the school year, but it starts off with some discussions at the board level this coming week. So to me, those are some of the pieces, and I appreciate Samson being part of this and also Bill being part of it. And Samson, you mentioned that Bill was a good resource as we're continuing to have these conversations. Would you recommend that we kind of go first to him, to you, or what is your recommendation as we want to continue some of the dialogue moving forward?
You'll be able to go through him. I know that he lets me know what, is, I guess when opportunities like this come for him, and he takes them, he lets me know what's happening. And then, ultimately, then, if I'm available to be able to go, with them, then I definitely do.
All right, excellent, thank you. So I think those are kind of our next steps pieces. Is there any other thoughts around the table? Otherwise, that comes to the end of the agenda that we have put out in front of everybody.
Yeah, and I
Tim,
wanna-
Josh, do you have any recommendations on moving forward? With the community or staff or?
Thank you. Thank you both, and Samson, thank you for joining us. This has been, I think, from my perspective, great discussion and very informative. I learned a lot about the background, and I really appreciate your thoughts. And hopefully we can tap you in this process next time. So I guess we are ready to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.